Psalm 71 says, "I'll proclaim your power to the next generation, your might to all who are to come." We're going to hear from 5 people who are going to share their stories of what God has done over the last 140 years. And these stories just represent a few of the many stories of God's power and might, His faithfulness to us as a church. So sit back and enjoy. So Winifred, can you tell me, how did Ford's Lane start?
Well, apparently in the 1880s, there was some itinerant preachers going around, and they visited Cheadle, Hume and Bramhall, and there were some families Christians in that area who decided that they would like to have a much more simple form of worship along New Testament principles, homing in on Bible study and prayer. And there happened to be a gentleman, John Porter. He was a very wealthy businessman in the Bury area, that's in the north of Manchester, and he came and retired in Cheadle-Hulme area and joined this group of Christian believers. Then he was able to provide the money to buy the land in Ford's Lane and build the little chapel. And of course, Ford's Lane was just a little cinder track, and all around were cornfields and farms, and the only other thing that was of any importance was the blacksmith's forge at the end of Ford's Lane, owned by the Fords brothers, and that's why it was called that name. So Mr. and Mrs. Hollands, Sidney and Maggie Hollands, who lived in Manchester, they moved into Bramhall so that they could help with the ministry in the church. It wasn't a coincidence that they came in one sense. It was a great step of faith, but also Maggie Hollands was the daughter of one of the original members, a Mr. Downs, who was a farmer in the Woodford area.
I knew that Ford's Lane was the place for me. The warmth and the friendship, the Bible teaching that went on there, the kindness of people to somebody who just came by herself just struck me, and I knew that that was the place where God wanted me to serve Him for the next time.
Well, you arrived in 1961.
That's correct.
Right? Tell me a little bit about that, and then how the church got to get its own building.
Well, in late 50s and 60s, the population was increasing in Bramhall because a lot of people were coming for jobs. And so we came in 1961. There was about 40 people in fellowship at the church. We were very much welcomed, and because we were a bit younger than some of the others. And what was Ford's Lane like? Well, to begin with, the cinder track was still there. There were bushes down the road. There was large potholes. And guess what? Of course, they always got filled with lots of rainwater. You know, nothing changes. Gradually, more people came to the church. And it wasn't long before we realised we were getting packed like sardines in the chapel, and we'd have to do something about it. But with a real step of faith, Sidney Hollands and the elders had in 1961 decided to buy the plot of land opposite the little chapel. I don't think they realised that there was going to be such an explosion of the population in the area, but it was a real step of faith and vision, and they bought this. So in 1964, we all got a letter as members to say we're going to build this new church, and we need some money. It was going to cost £15,000. I mean, that was a lot of cash then, of course. And how much money was in the kitty? 300 and something. So after a very short time, various members gave sacrificially, lent money, and there was the money ready to start to build the church.
As soon as I came, the lady that ran the younger girls group asked me would I help her with the group. I'd already been to camps with her, so it wasn't a strange thing for me, and it was wonderful. And then Dr. Peter Tate, who was one of the elders, and I had meeting for some of the older young people at their home and at my home on various different times, doing really serious Bible study with the older young people, one of whom was Martin Cohurst, who learned very early to give a long sermon, and we all appreciated how these young people were growing, and it was wonderful to see him and others going on to serve the Lord all over the world.
I joined Fords Lane in the early 80s, and one of the first things I noticed was the emphasis on working with young people of all ages. There were lots of teenagers coming to their groups and bringing their friends. We had lots of fun, but there was always good teaching by a wide range of interesting speakers. I saw the impact one morning when I opened Scripture Union notes and found they'd been written by one of Fords Lane's young people, who is now the vicar of a large church in Nottingham. And there are several Fords Lane people who have made a significant impact on the wider Christian community, both in the UK and worldwide, with groups, for example, like Operation Mobilisation, World Vision, The Message, SIM, WEC, and some support spouses who now lead other churches.
People always took an interest in you. They, people of all ages would talk to you, chat to you, find out how your life was going. They were very supportive. And so we were all encouraged to take up some kind of role within the church. Mine was mainly with singing. I was part of the various choirs that were formed for either Christmas or Easter. I was about to start my nurse training in 1975. So around that time, I'd also joined the leadership team for Covenanters, of which Joyce Rennie was also a part. And so that was Friday evenings, club night. We were there on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evenings after church, there were meetings. So duties permitting, I was involved in that, and it was great fun.
So how was serving encouraged at Fords Lane?
Well, as a teenager and then a young man, the elders always took a great deal of care to encourage service. So it started off just moving the chairs around in the church. There were two ways of setting out the chairs, one for the morning and one for the evening. So it was my job to put the chairs in the right place for the right service. And then after that, I went into helping with the youth work as one of the youth leaders. For a time, I led a house group, and then eventually I went into the leadership of the church.
My first impressions of Fords Lane. So I turned up at Fords Lane in 1973. I had been invited by a lady that I was working with. And to be honest, when I first came, it was a bit of a shock because at that time the main service was an open table communion service. There was no music, no instruments. One elder always set the pace, always set the key. It was communion every week. People shared Bible readings, and so it was like something that I'd never been to before. Also, all the women were wearing hats, and that was something that I hadn't been used to. I didn't quite understand about the head coverings, and but the other thing that I had never had was the Bible taught in the way that they taught it that morning. It changed that day from being a historical document to a living word for me, and it really captured me. So I came back that night, and the place was packed with young people. So I very quickly became part of the youth group. But I just really felt a part. I felt welcomed. I felt like I'd found where I belonged. So I've stayed.
In the 90s, there was quite a number of young people learning to play musical instruments. And the regular musicians encouraged them to join the group. And I think this made the young people feel valued and part of the church.
How has it impacted me? Well, I came to appreciate the Word of God in a very different way. I came to understand what a supportive church community can mean to all ages. Maybe early 90s, the 9:45 service was started, and the whole run of the service changed. The whole the way that we conducted the morning service, it became a much more contemporary style, and the elders decided it would be a good idea if there was a group to lead the singing of the more contemporary songs. Everybody knew the hymns, which was fine, but the more contemporary songs needed a bit of leading. So I was asked if I would get together a group to do that, which I did. And that was the forerunner of the music group that we've got today.
Well, the impact that Fords Lane has had on me has been really quite remarkable. And I know I've always felt the love of God, and that's been expressed through the love that's been shown to me by my brothers and sisters here in the Fellowship of Fords Lane. You know, being in a fellowship like this, you celebrate the high times, but when you have difficulties in your life, that's when you really lean on God, but we also lean on those with whom we share fellowship week by week. So that's been a great part of my life. And when I was younger, learning the basics of Christianity, I don't think that I was ever told what to do. It was more a matter of leading by example and equipping me through an understanding of the Bible how to deal with whatever life throws at me. So what I would say is that, speaking on behalf of Ros and me, that we really love this church and we view it as being our home.
I think for those of us who experienced unexpected sadness, the love of the church family was really overwhelming, and it was a great witness to the wider community, and the love that we experienced, I feel, continues still at Fords Lane.
Well, we've learned in this fellowship that there's work for everybody to do, whatever your age, whatever your physical condition, and I thank God for that. And I would just say, through every changing scene of life, He's with us. In sorrow and in joy, I've been through all those periods at Fords Lane and been sustained and helped by Him and by my fellow Christians here in this church. Great is His faithfulness.
We hope you've been encouraged by hearing these stories. But as we stand in the shade of what God has done over the last 140 years, may that give us a bigger vision and encourage our faith for how He may want to use us to lead the next chapter and the next generation forward in this church. But may God get all the glory in Fords Lane Church for however long He gives us.